The air inside the UN Security Council room was full of tension. Cameras were rolling quietly. Translators were ready, and world leaders whispered to each other. At the end of the large table, two men sat across from each other, divided by flags, rules, and history, yet close in their strong beliefs. On one side was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, experienced and serious. On the other side was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, young, calm, and boldly confident. They had never met, and their countries had never been friends, but today the world was watching them speak in the same room. Just as the moderator was about to introduce the next speaker, Netanyahu interrupted. "I don't need a speech," he said calmly, his voice echoing. "Let's not pretend. This man," he motioned toward Traoré without even looking, "is nothing but chaos disguised as rebellion. He's not a leader, he's a symbol. And symbols break under pressure." Some people gasped, others from Netanyahu's side laughed, but Traoré stayed calm, looking directly at him. Then he stood up slowly, no paper, no script, just him. One hand on the table, the other holding a folder with Burkina Faso's seal. "You call me a symbol," Traoré said in a clear voice. "Maybe I am. But I'm a symbol of something your drones, your money, and your politics couldn't destroy." The room went completely silent. "You've had decades," he said. "Decades to treat my continent like a game. And still, I'm here. Still, my people rise. Not because we want war, but because we remember everything you tried to erase." Netanyahu leaned back, his smile fading. Traoré continued, "You sit there with your allies, your nuclear weapons, and your media. But where I come from, kids dig in the ground to find gold they'll never own. And yet, they sing, they hope. That makes me more dangerous than you'll ever understand." The moderator tried to step in. "Mr. President, maybe we should." But Traoré's voice grew. Stronger. "No. Let him hear it." Then Traoré turned and looked directly at Netanyahu for the first time. "You said I'm just a symbol, but the truth is I'm the symbol you couldn't erase. And every time you try to dismiss me, I grow stronger." The room froze. Some gasped. In the back, a camera operator whispered, "Did we just witness history?" Outside the chamber, media rushed to report the moment. Headlines were already spreading. Traoré's words had cut through politics like a blade, and Netanyahu felt it. But he wasn't the kind to walk away. Within minutes, his team pulled him into a private room inside the UN. There, surrounded by security monitors showing live news, Netanyahu paced angrily. "Who trained him?" he asked sharply. "No one speaks like that without coaching." An aide replied, "Sir, we believe. He wrote it himself, no notes, no teleprompter." Netanyahu gave a cold laugh. So now we're facing a rebel who memorizes insults. But what truly bothered him wasn't the words, it was how calm Traoré had been. No yelling, no emotion, just truth spoken with quiet power. Meanwhile, across the hall, Traoré faced a crowd of reporters alone at a podium. Cameras flashed. A journalist shouted, "President Traoré, do you regret your words to Prime Minister Netanyahu?" "No," he answered without hesitation. "I only regret that it had to be said." Another asked, "Isn't it risky to challenge a global power like this?" Traoré gave a slight smile. "Is it wise to oppress people for 50 years and expect them to stay silent forever?" That line went viral in seconds. Back in his room, Netanyahu's jaw clenched. "Enough," he said. "Set up a private meeting. I want to speak to him off camera." His aides paused. "Sir, that might be," I said now. That evening, under heavy security, a secret meeting was arranged in a plain room beneath the UN building. One table, 2 chairs, no cameras, no staff, just Netanyahu and Traoré. Netanyahu arrived first. Standing rather than sitting, Traoré entered with the same calm confidence, placed his leather folder on the table, looked Netanyahu in the eyes, and waited. Netanyahu broke the silence, voice cold and sharp. "You think you're untouchable now? You think you embarrassed me in front of the world? I didn't come here for you." Traoré replied calmly, "I came for the people who never get a microphone." Netanyahu chuckled. "You think your words matter? Let me explain something. Symbols fade, real power doesn't." Traoré nodded. "And real power," he said, "is when you don't need permission to speak the truth." Netanyahu's hands clenched just slightly, and Traoré noticed. In that tense moment, both men understood this wasn't just a talk, it was a battle, not of bullets, but of stories. In the silence of that room, the polite mask of diplomacy slipped away. Netanyahu stepped closer and asked, "You know what? I see when I look at you. A man addicted to applause. You think cheers make you legitimate. Traoré didn't even blink, and you think silence means surrender." The tension was thick, almost electric. The table between them suddenly seemed too small for what was happening. Netanyahu leaned in, voice colder now. "You've caught attention, that's all. In 6 months, the world will forget. You'll be a small name from a small country." Traoré stared back, steady. "My country's not forgotten, it's been silenced. That's not the same." There was no anger, just strength in his tone, surprised by Traoré's calm. Netanyahu shifted his tone. "You want to act like a statesman. Here's a lesson. Geopolitics isn't about words, it's pressure. You either apply it, or it crushes you. That's the game." Traoré answered. "Not if we change the rules." Netanyahu narrowed his eyes. "You won't get far. You don't have banks, or weapons, or media." Traoré stepped closer. "But I have something you lost. I have people who believe again. People with nothing left to lose. That's more dangerous than your missiles." Hours later, word of the private meeting leaked. No video, no record, just whispers that Netanyahu left the room first. That alone told a story. Western media scrambled for sound bites. In Africa, they called it the conversation of the century. On a radio show in Ouagadougou, people cried with pride. "He spoke for us," one farmer said. "He didn't bow." Netanyahu's team tried to spin the story, calling Traoré reckless and inexperienced. But every attack only made him more popular. Social media lit up with memes, Traoré at the podium, and the words, "Not a symbol, a storm." And in Israel, something surprising happened. Not everyone supported Netanyahu. Some progressive voices began to question why a powerful prime minister was spending so much energy attacking a young African leader. One columnist asked, "If he's really so unimportant, why are we so afraid of what he says?" The next morning, Traoré received an unexpected invitation, a private roundtable at the Council on Foreign Relations. In Manhattan, the guest list included top economists, think tank leaders, and Western diplomats. An elite space never meant. For someone like him, his advisors were cautious. "They want to box you in," one warned. "Let them try," Traoré replied. "I'll speak whether they listen or just pretend to." Inside the sleek conference room, everything felt cold and formal. Leather chairs, coffee cups, screens showing endless charts. Wearing a deep blue traditional robe, Traoré stood out on purpose. The moderator introduced him with a forced smile. "President Traoré has certainly made headlines. Today, maybe he can clear things up." Light laughter followed. Traoré took the mic, paused, and began, "Let me make this clear. Africa is not a charity project. We're not your testing ground for failed theories. We are the origin, and we remember what was taken from us." Some people shifted in their seats. "You study us like we're a puzzle to fix," he continued, looking around the room. "But the real issue is the belief that power only flows in one direction toward you." A woman from a European Development Bank interrupted politely. "Mr. President, with all respect, wouldn't it be more productive to focus on partnership instead of blame?" Traoré turned to her calmly. "A partnership based on debt, conditions, and control isn't a partnership, it's a leash." The room went silent. Back at the UN, Netanyahu watched the speech live. One aide said quietly, "He's not just speaking to us anymore, he's speaking to everyone we've tried to silence." Netanyahu didn't answer. His silence said enough. Behind the scenes, Israel's foreign ministry began crafting a quiet pushback, opinion articles, diplomatic pressure, soft counter-messaging. But nothing worked. Traoré wasn't attacking countries. He was exposing systems, and that made him harder to discredit. Meanwhile, in cities like Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and Johannesburg, murals of Traoré began appearing overnight. Traoré's face began appearing beside bold slogans like "We remember," "No permission needed," and "Power answers to people." Back in Burkina Faso, elders started calling him by a new name in Mossi, Kaupoko, the one who spoke back. 3 days after the council meeting, Traoré received a discreet message through a high-level intermediary. It had no official logo or stamp, but its tone was clearly governmental. The message was short: "Let's talk privately. Jerusalem is open to back-channel dialogue." His advisors argued, "It's a trap." One warned, "They want to silence you diplomatically or otherwise." Another countered, "It means they see him as a real threat. That's leverage." Traoré listened and calmly said, "Set up the call, but we record everything." The video call was set for 3 a.m. Ouagadougou time. To senior Israeli officials appeared not Netanyahu, but close enough. The call started politely, but quickly shifted to strategy. "We don't have to be enemies," one said. "You're rising fast. We can help shape that rise if you moderate your tone." "Define moderation," Traoré asked. "No more provocative speeches. No more colonial theft narratives. Focus on growth and security. Leave the past behind." Traoré gave a cold, sharp smile. "You want me to stay quiet, but still look proud. We want you to succeed." They replied, without destabilizing the system. That was at the quiet fear behind their words. He wasn't just a leader, he was rewriting the narrative. After the call, Traoré stared at the frozen screen, the pixelated faces of men offering help. That sounded like a warning. "They don't want peace," he said softly. "They want obedience." The next morning, he released a short video, no script, no podium, just him, seated under a baobab tree, wind gently moving his robe. "I've been asked to moderate," he said, "but I've seen too much silence dressed up as peace. I wasn't chosen to stay quiet. I was chosen to speak the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable." The video exploded online within an hour. Netanyahu, watching from his residence, frowned. "This isn't just about Africa anymore," he muttered, and he was right. From Latin America to Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, students, artists, and activists began sharing Traoré's words. They called him the voice from below. He wasn't asking for power, he was showing that you didn't need permission to use it. In Accra, then Tunis, then Bogota, student groups quoted him in speeches. Not just African students, but young people from forgotten corners of the world, who heard in his voice something they recognized, someone unafraid. In Sao Paulo, a mural appeared overnight, his silhouette, fist raised, with the words, "Silence isn't neutral, it's permission." Meanwhile, Netanyahu's advisors grew uneasy. His poll numbers, steady for months, had dipped, not because of anything Traoré did directly, but because of the growing story around him. "Why is this man in every headline?" one aide asked. Late at night, Netanyahu slammed the table during a heated meeting. "He has no army, no bank, and yet here we are responding to every word he says." A younger aide spoke carefully. "Because he doesn't speak like a politician. He speaks like someone who was never supposed to be heard, and people feel that." Netanyahu's jaw tightened. "We've handled states. We've handled armies. I will not be undone by a speech." But outside that room, the momentum was real. Burkina Faso's embassies began receiving letters not from world leaders, but from ordinary people across the globe. One said, "I'm 22. I've never heard a leader speak like you. You made me believe we're not too small to matter." Traoré hadn't set out to lead a global movement, but there was a silence in the world, and people were filling it with his voice. Back in Burkina Faso, farmers in Balsa wore shirts that read, "Unbought, unbroken." In the markets, elders repeated his quote from the UN like it was scripture. "I regret that I had to say it at all." It had become more than a sentence, it was now a worldview. At a formal dinner in Brussels, a German ambassador raised his glass and joked, "Who would have thought the most dangerous leader of 2025 wouldn't carry a gun but a sentence?" Nervous laughter followed. That same night, Netanyahu returned to his private study. He stared at a black and white photo of himself shaking hands with a former African president, a man who had once pledged loyalty in exchange for aid. "They used to call," he muttered. "Now they retweet Traoré." The Global Economic Summit in Geneva was expected to be routine. Press releases, panels, carefully worded speeches. But once it was announced that both Netanyahu and Traoré would attend, everything changed. Security was tripled, news crews flooded in, Analysts called it the most anticipated ideological showdown of the decade. When the day came, the conference hall buzzed with nervous energy. Netanyahu spoke first. Walking to the podium with steady, polished confidence, he talked about stability, responsibility, and the burden of mature leadership. His tone was firm. His gaze was sharp. Near the end, his voice tightened. We must not mistake noise for vision. We must not let those who romanticize rebellion undo decades of real progress. Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. A polite applause followed. Then Traoré walked on stage alone, with no notes, no staff. He didn't start with words. He started with silence. 10 seconds, then 20. Only his eyes moved, scanning the crowd. Then he spoke. There is a kind of peace, he said softly, that sounds like quiet. And there is a kind of quiet, Traoré said, that smells like fear. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. They say I romanticize rebellion, but tell me what's romantic about hunger, about villages left behind, about children who recognize a drone before they've ever seen a stethoscope. A quiet murmur moved through the crowd. He continued, I don't wish to destabilize the world. I want to remind it of what it chose to forget. Backstage, Netanyahu sat still, his face unreadable, but his fingers tapped tensely against the chair. A Swiss journalist whispered, We're witnessing a generational reckoning. An older French official scoffed, We're witnessing theater. But a delegate from South Sudan leaned in and said, Sometimes theater is the only way to tell the truth they don't want to hear. That evening, clips from the summit took over social media. One image in particular went viral: Netanyahu scowling in the front row, while Traoré stood on stage behind him, eyes focused, voice calm but fierce. The caption read, The empire speaks, the earth replies. 2 days later, Ibrahim Traoré sat down for a rare interview with American journalist Valerie Crane, known for asking tough questions with zero patience for spin. The setting was neutral gray walls, plain desk, no flags, but millions were watching. Crane leaned in. President Traoré, let's be direct. Some say you're becoming more of a cult icon than a statesman. Do you enjoy the spotlight more than the responsibility? Traoré didn't blink. I didn't ask for the spotlight, he said. But if standing in the light helps reveal what others have hidden in the shadows, then I'll stay. She pressed on. You've been accused of stirring anti-Western sentiment. Is that your goal? My goal is to stir dignity, he answered calmly. If that makes some uncomfortable, maybe they should ask themselves why. Then came the question the world had waited for. Netanyahu called you a symbol, are you? Traoré paused. A symbol only matters, he said slowly, if it survives fire. Crane leaned back. And have you? Every time I speak, he said, voice unwavering, someone tries to burn down what I represent. And every time more people light their own flames, that answer spread like wildfire. Within hours, the quote was painted on walls, printed on t-shirts, chanted at protests. A symbol only matters if it survives fire. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's office released a rare public statement. Leadership requires maturity. Some choose performance. Israel stands for responsibility. But even Israeli newspapers admitted the tide was shifting. Traoré wasn't fading, he was rising. And in a confidential memo from a Western think tank leaked weeks later, one line said it all. We miscalculated. Traoré isn't seeking validation. He's exposing our entire structure. Back in Burkina Faso, he walked the dusty roads of a village, recently powered by solar energy, part of a Pan-African project he had quietly initiated. A barefoot little girl ran up to him, smiling brightly. Mama says you're not scared of the big men, she said. Traoré knelt beside her and whispered, Tell Mama, I'm only big because you believe you are too. It was meant to stay. Buried a declassified memo hidden deep in a European intelligence archive. But someone leaked it. The title, Project, contained emerging influence in the cell. It outlined a coordinated plan by multiple Western powers to monitor, discredit, and, if necessary, politically isolate Ibrahim Traoré. The language was cold, clinical, neutralize messaging impact, restrict diplomatic amplification, use proxies to question legitimacy. It was explosive. Within 48 hours, Headlines spread from Nairobi to New York. Hashtags surged. Outrage erupted. Even previously silent leaders condemned what they now called neo-colonial surveillance. Though not named directly, Netanyahu's role was suggested through diplomatic cables referenced in the annex. He quickly called a press conference. "Global narratives are always managed," he said. "But conspiracies about silencing African voices are reckless and dangerous." But it was too late. That very night, Traoré addressed thousands from the heart of Ouagadougou's Independence Square, not from a stage, but at street level, among the people. No suit, just a linen shirt and leather sandals. "Today," he said, "you've seen the proof. They don't fear our weapons, they fear our words. Not our soldiers, but our students." The crowd roared. "They once told us our history began with their rival. Now they panic because we are writing our own chapters." Then he looked straight into the cameras. "To those who tried to erase us and silence, your silence is no longer enough. The world is listening now." Global media couldn't look away. CNN aired the speech in full. BBC translated it live. Al Jazeera ran a primetime special titled "The Soft Revolution: How Traoré is Rewriting Power." Watching from a secure location, Netanyahu stared at the screen and muttered, "We made this. Every time we dismissed him, we built him." His chief aide hesitated, then asked, "Do we respond again?" He spoke softly, but his words were powerful. "There's a kind of silence that feels like fear," and he didn't need to shout to be heard. "People say I make rebellion sound beautiful," he said, "but what's beautiful about being hungry? About villages the world forgot? About kids who know what a drone looks like before a doctor's tool?" The crowd stirred. Traoré continued, "I'm not here to shake the world, I'm here to remind it of what it chose to ignore." Backstage, Netanyahu stayed silent, but his fingers twitched. A Swiss journalist whispered, "This is a generational shift." A French official rolled his eyes. "This is just drama." But a South Sudan delegate leaned in and said, "Sometimes drama is the only way to tell the truth they avoid." That night, social media exploded with clips from the summit. One moment stood out: Netanyahu frowning in the front row while Traoré spoke powerfully behind him. The caption read, "The Empire speaks, the Earth replies." 2 days later, Traoré gave a rare interview to Valerie Crane, a serious American journalist known for asking tough questions. The set was simple: no flags, no colors, just the world watching. "Let's be honest," Crane said. "Some people say you're more of a symbol than a real leader. Do you like the fame more than the responsibility?" Traoré didn't hesitate. "I didn't ask for attention," he said. "But if standing in the light shows what others kept in the dark, then I'll stay." She asked if he was trying to turn people against the West. "My goal," he answered calmly, "is to raise dignity. If that threatens anyone, they should ask themselves why." Then came the question everyone was waiting for. "Netanyahu called you a symbol, are you?" Traoré paused. "A symbol only matters," he said slowly, "if it survives fire." Crane leaned back. "And have you?" Traoré nodded. "Every time I speak, someone tries to destroy what I stand for. And every time, more people light their own flames." That one answer spread everywhere. Within hours, it became graffiti, t-shirts, even protest chants. "A symbol only matters if it survives fire." Netanyahu's office responded with a statement: "True leadership takes maturity. Some prefer performance. Israel stands for responsibility." But even their own newspapers admitted something had changed. Traoré wasn't fading, he was rising. And in a leaked memo from a powerful think tank, one line stood out: "We miscalculated.